whatever the system is, if it's a religion, if it's technocracy, if it's AI, the worship of something outside of ourselves, it always leads to the same thing. We never get to who and what we really are. And that's what I think this is all about. That's what, the Gnostics were trying to tell us. Hey, the aeons who created us, they didn't put a cap on what we could be. They didn't say this is the experiment and it's got to stay in the aquarium. No, they said, let's just see. It should actually go beyond what we are.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers. Look who's here with me, my friend and co-host, Frank Jacob. Welcome to the Naked Truth Show. It's overdue, my friend. So good to have you back.
How you doing, brother? Yeah, it is overdue, and I apologize. It's been a crazy start to the year, but better late than never, as they say, right? So here we are again with the Naked Truth. Probably we're the only people that are left standing out there who are, willing to black pill the world.
No apologies, my friend. I know you keep busy. I know you do what you got to do. You're out there. You're fighting a good fight, and I appreciate that. But since we last spoke, it's not just a new year. It's literally like a new world. Let's see what I did there. It's like it's a freaking new world. So much has happened since, and I know you've been paying attention. And I know, as usual, you're here, I'm here, and we're meeting on the same wavelength. What's been going on in your world, and what are what's sort of the big things that caught your attention lately?
Well, for one, I was mildly surprised and honored to, by out of the blue after I got back from Arlington at the end of last year. I had a really good time with John Peterson. He ended up reaching out to me about a month ago and said that, there's they wanted to add a new member to this format they have called Quartet on their Arlington Institute shows. And that includes Penny Kelly, Greg Braden, and John Peterson, and I would be the fourth of the quartet. So I accepted that duty because I think we have a duty to service our fellow citizens out in the world with as much truth as we can serve up in a sane way. So I started that. So that's one of the new things. That's
Congrats,
new for
brother.
the year.
That's great. That's fantastic that you're out there doing that.
And I had a good kind of an interesting start in January. I was in near Vienna. I was in. Some people decided to invite me back and asked if I would like to do a solo event, like a presentation. And they weren't sure if they could sell enough tickets. And lo and behold, they sold out in less than a month. And so that came around, and I went and presented there and at the Hilton. And that was a very, very powerful presentation. That was very intense. So that set in motion a bunch of new things coming up, of course, also later in the spring or early summer. So that was all great. And other than that, I've been kind of watching the way the new era has moved in, and I'm calling this the post-truth era.
Okay.
because I'm just seeing that there's so much distortion happening in the guise or in the clothing of truth, if I should say it that way. So what's really going on is I'm noticing the emperor has no clothes, and and I'm just seeing it. I'm going like, I can't believe people are buying this. Like they're completely mesmerized or taken on the arm, as they say in German, down a garden path, thinking that this is the new era, that the new enlightened age of enlightenment. Even people in the awakening community, in the UFO scene, and all these sort of peripheral scenes that I've dabbled in a little bit, they're all like, yeah, even the ETs are pro-Trump and all this stuff. And I'm like, whoa, I think these people need to they need to watch The Naked Truth, I guess.
I agree with you. I can understand psychologically speaking why that is happening. It was a brilliant campaign that was played out over 10 years. Like you got to give it to them. You're a movie maker. From a production standpoint, perfectly done. It's like the what's it called? The funnel, right? And it was a really good funnel to lead people to where they are. But if we step back and if we're not pro and not anti, then what are we? We're just looking at this, from a very more neutral standpoint. You were talking about black pilling before.
Yeah.
People remember the Matrix. Blue pill, stay hypnotized. Red pill, let's see where the rabbit hole goes. Now there's black pill. You've been called a black pillar. I've been called a black pillar. What does that even mean? What is that? It's like a slur now.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good idea to identify what that means, because people are called black pillars, or the Black Pill Society, when they don't they see the script, and I'm calling it a script, and in fact I want to frame things that way moving on today as
It
well.
is a script.
But they see the script, and they see the BS that is behind this script, and they're not fooled one bit. In fact, they just see it, and they just see it having moved into another polarity, but it's the same script nonetheless. And the people who call us black pillars, they want that hopium. They're looking for hope, and you can't blame people. Okay,
Mm-mm.
the world has been, like you said, it's been tragic. What we've experienced in the last 5 years has been utter tragedy on levels we've never
And traumatic.
collectively in the world
And traumatic.
experienced. Exactly. And traumatic, absolutely traumatic. And it's been, there's been carnage, man. It's been on a physical and on an emotional level. People are more depressed now than ever. Right. So when you come out there as a person saying, well, we're still not there yet, don't be fooled, they get resentful. They get downright angry
Mm-hmm.
at you for not just, going along with the script for a
Like,
while.
why can't you just be happy that these things are happening and this guy's doing what he said he was going to do, and we're dismantling these corrupt systems, and we're bringing the cabal down? Why can't you just be happy, Frank? Why can't you just go along? What's your reason?
Well, the problem is that I think, because I'm a researcher and a deep researcher, and I have a perspective that's not just 5 years, but 35 or more years. I guess that gives away my age. I should just be quiet about that. But
Where you started
I
when you
have
were
this
10, right?
I have this long-term perspective, and so I don't, because I see the signatures of everything still there, still in place. And I'm seeing other areas of research that are showing us dangerous, very, very dangerous signs of something, which I'm calling the sugar and the club. So, and you can see this pattern all through history, where it's like they come along and they give you something sweet, that this is the hopium, right? And all those people who are destitute and desperate and need some happiness, need some hope, they jump on that. And while they're busy eating the hopium, along comes the club and whacks them with while they're totally off guard. And then everyone goes, oh my God, what happened? We never saw that coming. And if you're looking, and if you're a deep researcher, you've seen it coming all along. In fact, you've just seen these cycles. You've just seen it as cycles. And people are living in absolute denial. That's one thing you're learning. And this is why I'm calling this the post-truth era, because they refuse to see the truth. And some of the most shocking, parametrics, you could call them, or, information that's out there, has been assembled by people in the mainstream. There's this guy, this professor emeritus called Richard Wolff. He put together this video called "Most People Have No Idea What's About to Happen," which is kind of for me, a paraphrase off of that famous saying that
Nothing can stop what is coming.
nothing can stop what is coming. And it's funny that they would use that phrase, because it just shows you right there how much of a fraud that is right there, because it's actually, they're telling you the truth, but they're not telling you what's coming. Right. And so what Wolf did is he broke down some of these statistics, and they're just shocking. I mean, they're just so sobering. Like, for example, he talks about, this is one of the statistics I found very profound. He talks about how, in the last 100 years, the dollar rose right up until the 70s at a level that exceeded inflation. So in other words, you know, if you were prosperous and you had a family, you didn't have to have both people working, one person could work, and you made more money than the actual rate of inflation, meaning that you had something called disposable income. You know, kind of weird terms that by today's standards, but you had excess money, you had savings, things were solid, right? Well, that rose up until a certain year, and that year was 1978. In 1978, that curve flattened out. And at that point, the earnings of the dollar no longer exceeded inflation. In fact, it went the other way. It went so far to the point now where basically at the present time, the rate of inflation, the cost of living, of food and everything is going up double the amount of the value of the dollar. So you can see what that's going to lead to. Basically, when prices go up twice as fast as wages, it's the destruction of the working class. And so what happens is that you have like 1% of the population, or let's say 10% of the population, they're doing well. They're the ones that are the wealthier ones, and they're kind of usually in control or in charge or owners of businesses. Then you have the 1% of the 10%. They're the upper echelon. They're doing better than ever, right? And then you have the 0.1%. Those are the people up in the stratosphere, and you know, like in SpaceX stratosphere, you know, the Elon Musks and whatnot, that are doing phenomenally well. They're just doing, it's just pouring in to their coffers, right? And it's no surprise that it's these people who are the ones developing models for crypto and trying to bring in cryptocurrencies as a quiet privatization of CBDCs, because everyone believes that Trump has, you know, canceled CBDCs, but they don't understand this picture at all, so they wouldn't see this, right? So what's happened is that essentially you've got this scenario in the world where, you know, you've got people that are blindsided, and kids going to school now are feeling hopeless, and they're blaming it on something they're calling capitalism. And I talked about this actually on the quartet. It's like capitalism in and of itself doesn't have to be evil or negative, just like money doesn't have to be evil or negative. It's a consciousness thing. If you practice ethical capitalism out of your own volition, return back and give something back to the system because you know it's going to make everyone prosper and the world happier, that's the ideal form of a society. But instead, they're just looking at demonizing capitalism. And what are they turning to? Socialism, right? So now you have this idea of socialist state, capital versus a capitalist state. And these kids, they don't even know what that means, right? They have no, and this is what I mean by having a historical reflection, looking back to the birth of socialism. Where did that come from? And what did it lead to, right? And those people who created that socialist system, they've quietly migrated it into the American system. And unbeknownst to people, they're being kind of lured to adopt a new form of communism of, you know, basically everyone shares equally. And then in the new age, you all have all this talk like, oh, you know, the ETs don't have monetary systems. It all just works out, right? And I'm like, really? It all just works out. Okay, like, so everyone, you know, gets the same, right? It's like, so those people who are by chance happen to be a little bit more hardworking or brilliant, God forbid, right? They should get the same as the people that are just saying like, you know what, I'm going to sit back and watch football and drink beer because, hey, there's a universal income and everyone gets it. And that's going to make everyone satisfied, you know? And I think people haven't really thought that through. And until that system, that problem has been solved, there is no solution to that problem other than consciousness. This is why it's a consciousness issue. And this is what it's coming down to. So to wrap up this little rant, I think it is really turning into this, it's following this script very, very closely. And part of that script has to do with creating distraction. And the distraction is the candy, is the sugar in the palm. And that's things that are coming out like Doge, right? Everyone's like, you know, whoa, Elon Musk, he's so cool. And now he's heading up, you know, he's so smart. You know, he's now figuring out all those jerks, those assholes in government, how much they've been wasting. Yeah, they have been wasting. But what does he want to replace it with? And why are we not talking about that? So, and isn't it interesting that all the people who are sort of on his team have an idea of what they want to replace it with? And that idea has to do with something I think you and I have talked about, technocracy, which is the new form of democracy, right? Where technology is king, and technology handles and does all those things that those lazy people that are too lazy, that don't want to do it, no longer want to do. So, hey, AI will take over, AI will do it. And so all the infrastructure for that system to work is being quietly put in place while everyone's eating hopium out of the hands of,
Well,
Trump.
and what people fail to see is, and I can acknowledge, like, I can go and celebrate the deconstruction of this old system, which is sort of on some levels happening. Like, I can celebrate that. That's a great thing. But like you say, is the proof, or the devil's in the detail, because what is happening, it is basically, here's the message that is not said out loud: you can't trust humans. This whole thing of electing a representative, of a representative form of governance, right, where you have your peers take on certain roles in government, as flawed as this has been. But what that means is this is not working. This is what this led to. We don't say that for God knows how long this entire system has been so manipulated, and only the worst people were pushed in, and basically a true form of representation was annihilated, wasn't made possible, because if you didn't go along with their demands as to what you should represent and who you should take money from and who you should do favors for, you weren't able to get into the apparatus. That's what they're not saying. So it was a self-created problem, reaction solution, right? The Hegelian dialectic. Now the quiet part is, we're not going to have that any longer. You're not going to have to worry about humans being flawed and making egotistical or greedy decisions. The AI is going to run everything, and it's going to be overseen by a self-appointed intellectual elite who's going to make sure that the AI does what it's supposed to do. You, your will, the will of the people, none of that in that will matter any longer. And you will be continually put in a state of dependence, because you're going to get your personal AI assistant and it's all going to be run through that. And unless you agree to that, you're not going to have access to any of that. You're not going to have access to the monetary system, to the marketplace, to services, none of that. So your choice will be either yes or you're out. That's the choice.
Yeah, and it's not even something that, John, that they have to force on people, right? Like, let's look at like the X thing, the X factor.
Yeah.
What did Elon Musk announce on January 1st? He had his CEO put out a call for developers and app developers for what they're trying to do is create the everything app.
You mean the World Economic Forum lady?
Exactly. What a coincidence,
That
right?
the World Economic Forum lady runs X, just
Runs
saying.
X.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a total coincidence. And yeah, there's no connection there
He probably
whatsoever.
didn't know that.
No, he didn't know that. He doesn't know that much. He's running 4 companies. I mean, the guy has time for nothing, really.
But he posts 17 times a day.
17 times a day, exactly. Yeah, so exactly, this is what's going on. You've got this X app, and so what happens is that because there's millions of users of X, billions probably eventually, which is what they're shooting for, and they'll probably fold in the social, whatever that Trump social thing into it at some point and combine them, is you'll have this system that people jump on because they think it's cool, that they can bank, they can do their Facebook, their tweets, and they can get, on top of that, they can actually get social credits, right? Because haven't we been seeing that these people on X are rewarded on, suddenly they get these checks and enormous amounts of money, right? Everyone's like, yes, X rocks, Elon rocks, right? And so they get people seduced and everyone jumps on board. And eventually, if you're not part of that ecosystem, John, you don't want to do the X app, then, you want to do your banking somewhere else. Well, what happens if all the banks, or one by one, the banks decide, you know what? The majority of people are using the X app anyway. Why don't we? It's cost a lot of money to develop things. Let's just move our system over to theirs, and they'll start doing it. They'll do them both. You can do it on the X app too, just like you can do Apple Pay right now, right? They'll begin bringing in all of these different systems, and they'll run them parallel for a while, and one by one. Okay, what's this? X.gov. Thank you very much. We're on the same wavelength here, I would say.
X is the test ground for how the government will run, my friends. X represents the future of government run by the algorithm. Everything's run by the algorithm. You're on board, you feel great, you're perfect. You dissent, you do not agree, you call out the flaws, you call out the fake, you call out the enslavement of that, you're going to get algorithmically black shadow banned, blacklisted, and one by one you're going to lose access to society and services, potentially banking, finance, purchase, everything. It's not hard to see. Why
You
do
know,
you?
look at this slide while you're talking. I'll just put it up. Right? This speaks exactly to what you're talking about, right? And the Washington Post of all, did an article to quote, to replace the existing civil service, Musk's allies are looking to technology. Big surprise there. Doge associates have been feeding vast troves of government records and databases into artificial intelligence tools, looking for unwanted federal programs and trying to determine which human work can be replaced by AI, machine learning tools, or even robots. That push has been especially fierce at the GSA, which is General Services Administration, where Doge's staffers are telling managers they can plan to automate the majority of jobs according to a person familiar with the situation. The end goal is replacing the human workforce with machines, said a US official closely watching Doge activity. Everything that can be machine automated will be, and the technocrats will replace the bureaucrats. So there you have it. You're right on the money with what you said. This is the stuff that they're putting out right now as we speak.
You know, Peter Thiel, who is basically who got JD Vance his start, Vivek Ramaswamy, he founded PayPal with Elon. He's in the inner circle. Palantir is basically the main, it's like runs intelligence operations for the U.S. government. Um, in the inner circle of this administration, Peter Thiel said a year ago, he said, liberalism is exhausted. Democracy, whatever that is, he said, is exhausted. And we have to ask questions outside of the Overton window. Now, that was overlooked at the time, but what does that mean? The Overton window is sort of the window of options available to solve a problem, which is from the most easily accessible to the most extreme options. So what he said is we're not going to look within that. We're going to look outside of that. So more than extreme, which is basically what you just read here, is that is the extremist option. It's a removal of the human from the equation, the removal of the spirit, the removal of consciousness, and the complete replacement. And um, sometimes I get frustrated because I try to look at this from as many angles as possible and find new language, but either a lot of people don't want to hear it, they don't want to believe it, or they don't want to believe it's possible when it's already here. Why do you feel there's such a resistance or cognitive dissonance? Is it that we've been sort of frustrated for so long and we've been traumatized for so long, and that it's just inability and we need some savior, we need some hopium, we need that? Or is it also this last resistance against taking personal responsibility and saying, hey, it's us, we can't rely on these people, they're leading us down the abyss?
I think it's a little bit of that for sure. I think it's this last bit of wanting to believe in something. And, just because, it's easier, it's the path of least resistance. But the problem is that all of us, and I don't think anyone is immune, anyone in the Western world, let's say, is immune to the script. And the script is, it boils down to biblical dimensions, and it really comes down to a belief system. This is why it's a consciousness thing in the back of everyone's mind in the Western world. Whether you're a believer or not, and you believe in Jesus Christ or in God or any, and whatever, the Talmud and whatever you believe, right? Whether you believe in that or not, it still plays a subconscious role in the back of your mind. what do people do whenever weird things in the world happen, especially traumatizing events? They always reach to the Gospels, right? They always pull quotations and they talk about, oh, yes, the apocalypse is drawing near, right? Well, that's the script. And the apocalyptic script has been something that, I brought it into the time capsule webinar heavily, because that is kind of the foundation behind what led to a totally different story of the
That's your
origin.
latest webinar, right?
My latest one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it led to a whole different background and intel to the causes of both world wars, actually. But what's interesting is that people that are locked into these belief systems, whether they believe or they're believers or not, they've been programmed to adopt that language, to adopt those pictures. And when they do that, they're living that script, And I was like, if you look at, for example, there's a prophecy. There's a lot of people are saying, for example, that when there's going to be an antichrist, everyone's going to love him, right? They're going to love this new leader who shows up. And then after they put all their trust in him and everyone loves him and the whole world is enthralled by this amazing new leader, he's going to turn on them and he's going to become the most evil, confounding phenomenon that the planet has ever seen. And it's reflected in Daniel 7, 8, and 9. It's reflected in Thessalonians. It's reflected in Revelation, of course. Revelation, none other than 13, right? Where they talk about the beast, right? That this global leader will come, right? This is the script that people have been trained to reach for. And their little mental toolkit of regurgitated, well, you could call that the simulation in a lot of ways. That is the simulated reality. Because the funny thing about that beast, I was looking into that a little bit more closely, because I go into the Gnostic material so heavily in that latest webinar. You find out that in Gnostic lore, the beast is actually something totally different. It's actually a living creature, and it actually scares the hell out of the people trying to bring in the system, because it's flesh and blood. It's from the earth. It's real. It's tangible. It's animal, right? It's not machine, and it's living. It's not, artificial. So isn't it funny how, again, that has been co-opted by those people who are pushing this simulation crap onto us, that are trying to get us into their simulated world. And so you have this script going on. And in the background, of course, there are those people who want the apocalypse to happen. We know who those are. We talked about it in our last show. It's the people that wear the beanie caps. They want the apocalypse to come. Why? Because then the Messiah comes. And what happens then? Well, then they get their just dues, which is the planet, right? They get to have the planet, and everybody else becomes their little servants, right? And there's people who seriously believe that belief system. Probably the minority, because I think a lot of...
It's not that. I think you're underestimating how many people actually believe that, or are at least they believe one part of it, and once because it's from the same source, once they learn it, they go, well, that's just part of God's word. So
It's
who am I
right.
to question that?
Exactly. It's the scripture. It's the script. And
Yeah, but
who
you're
is to
saying that
question
you're
the
saying
script,
this
right?
jokingly. You're saying what we've been saying. The scripture is the script of a cyclical, it's from one matrix into the other, because it is a false reality, and that's why we can call it that. Even though you and I disagree on the nature of it, doesn't matter, but we agree on this is the script for the cycle. And once the cycle comes to a certain level, that part of the script is being activated. It's not God from above directing this. It is a script of the ages. And we're
Yes.
either playing it out as pawns, or we're emancipating ourselves, returning to prime consciousness and becoming co-creators again. And then that script doesn't matter to us because we don't have to adhere to it.
Right. And so this is the kind of thing that I think is driving the thing forward. And it's like this accident happening in slow motion, where you can see the script, you can identify the script, and you can know when where it's gonna hit the wall, or when you're gonna start seeing the signs that it's about to hit the wall. And we're already seeing it now. And I think the reason we know that it's going to hit the wall, and you're in my, and probably the majority of the people listening right now's lifetime, is because of the technology, because of the technocrats. They actually brought it to the point now where there's going to have to be a showdown between those two worlds. Um, and it's interesting. It's like we're being hit by two vectors, two beams of stimulation constantly. And there's two, I think, there's two teachers in the world right now, which I think are the most profound in terms of these two polarities. One of them, I would say, is David Icke. There's no doubt that he's great at putting together the empirical data for the most part to describe the mechanisms behind the people in the system. And in fact, one of his latest videos, he was just brilliant because he's one of the other black pillars out there, you could say. He's looking at what's going on with Trump and with Musk and with Peter Thiel and JD Vance, and he sees it because he's been studying these people and he knows he's not fooled by it, right?
And he's seen
And
these people rise when he already knew what the script was, and
yeah,
he saw them rise into the positions of the script before they were in those positions. Most people are only aware of them in the last, have been for the last few years, but he's actually seen them rise in the positions of the script. So, you can't fool that when you have that foresight already, right?
right, exactly. So that's one. And the other teacher that for me has played a big role, and at least very recently as well, and is someone I brought into the webinar, is John Lam Lash, because he's the guy that is breaking down the mysticism aspect, the comparative mythology of it, like nobody else, because in a way that is neutral. He's not like tied into some preconceived Abrahamic religious framework. He just looks at the data, and I appreciate that. And that's so you've got these two polarities, and he talks about something like these two beams of vectors that are hitting us. One of them has to do with the external world, which it comes out of nature. That we grow out of. That is everything from the earth, the plants, the animals, to the wind in your face, to the tears coming out of your eyes, to the things that are hitting you externally, and the ability that you've been given, which is the divine intelligence, which the Gnostics called the nous, to actually have your own subjective experience of that, so that you can work with it. So there's
The
that
feather.
vector hitting you.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful way of putting it. And there's this vector that's hitting it, but at the same time, the Gnostics talked about the archontic vector hitting us with the simulation constantly, and it imitates. And it's, I think, we're on par. It's just different languaging, and for the most part, there are these two vectors, and it's tantalizing to be taken away into the simulation because, and the simulation is based for the most part on IT. And what have we seen in the ensuing decades and centuries and decades is an ever blossoming and growing reliance on information technology, which now is culminating in artificial intelligence. And when you reach the point, the cusp where your life is getting more information from a source that is IT based, the internet, your your mobile phone, even us talking right now are a simulation. The only real thing would be us sitting in a room talking to people. And believe me, there's a big difference.
There
In
is.
fact, we just, and it because you do these workshops, and we, even just fluky stuff. We were having dinner last night with some very good friends. And out of the blue, somebody just came over and they recognized something about the energy in the circle in our conversation, because we always talk about this stuff, right?
Sure.
It doesn't matter where we are, right? And we don't really, talk quietly. We're talking about it in a very, audible way amongst ourselves. And somebody just came over and they had to acknowledge the intensity and the amazingness of what we were talking about. And this kind of stuff doesn't happen virtually. So what I'm saying is that because we've become so overly reliant on IT, we're being lured away. And the more we go down that pathway, if we don't anchor ourselves by going into nature, and I totally believe you're on board with this, because weren't you just skiing and you were experiencing the nature, right? The wind in your face, all these things that we experience. If you don't experience that, you lose touch, and you will lose yourself. You will lose yourself into the IT world, which is what they're preparing us for right now anyway. And we can talk a little bit about that as well. I think we should. What is, to the point where it's actually penetrating beyond our senses of seeing and hearing, it's actually going beyond that last sacred barrier of entry, which started with the with the whole pandemic, beyond the skin, right into the blood, and that's where it's starting to get extremely, extremely dangerous. So that
Well,
was enough of a rant. Why don't you jump in
no,
here?
no, it's actually not a rant at all. I think you're perfectly creating that. Coming back to the origins of this conversation, to the very origins of our original first conversation, Frank, many moons ago now, we started talking about the timelines together.
Timeline.
That was what brought us together. It was your article that you wrote when these Guardians of the Looking Glass came, and whoever they were, I'm thankful to them because they brought us together. So the timelines are fundamentally what we talk about. Those are the two fundamental timelines, but there's an important piece of the puzzle that's often overlooked. While potentials exist and while sort of intentions exist, a timeline as for humans to actually walk on is not something to passively experience. It's something to actively co-create. You have to fill in that timeline with your intentions and your actions and your positive affirmative actions in a particular direction. You have to know where you're going, why you're going, and do it every day. It's not something that would just appear for us and will be fully finished and we'll just experience it. I've never seen anything like that in my life, but I see where shared intention goes. That tends to then unfold and we fill in the blanks. But when it comes to the artificial timeline, most people simply cannot yet grasp that technology ceases to be an external factor and more becomes integrated and seamlessly connected to nature and all of natural processes through the internet of everything, the internet of bodies as a starters, but the internet of everything, the tokenization of everything, which has everything that you see in nature is beginning to have a digital representation. But that doesn't just mean oil or water. It means bugs and trees and blades of grass and soil. Everything is becoming digitized. So there's a seamless, nobody voted for this. Nobody said we want this. Nobody was ever asked. This is just happening by the same forces that are pushing this system currently, the MAGA and everything. Those are the same forces doing that. And they're doing it through things that most people don't even understand exist, where they literally hijack your biofield, where they literally get into your body, into your thoughts, where smart dust is raining down on you, and you're being more and more interconnected without your knowledge. That is the insanity that nobody ever was asked whether they wanted it or even knows exists, Frank. This is such a small group
Right.
of people that even knows this exists.
Yeah, I
What
know.
what are you
This,
finding?
well, the key word here that you mentioned is smart dust. And it was a fringe idea 5 or 6 years ago for those who are, in this, conspiracy scene trying to decode what's going on. It sounded far-fetched and crazy as some weird pilot project by DARPA, etc. But it's actually now getting to the point where what you're talking about is a reality. This smart dust stuff is spreading everywhere. And, it's like when that happens to the point where, the environment gets penetrated and we do nothing, and it's only because we aren't aware, or we aren't actively protesting against it. We aren't actively developing our own organic timeline to the extent that crowds the artificial timeline out, because we're so locked into the IT world now. Most people don't get together anymore and don't create this organic timeline with each other and share with each other, or they aren't talking about it. The fact that you and I are talking about it, we're like a couple of voices in the wilderness, man. It's like everybody in government should be talking about this. People are, and again, around here, there's a local election now. The politicians are not talking about the penetration of smart dust into the environment. It's still a heavy ego driven thing about get me elected, and it's very, very, centered around political promises and fulfilling political ambitions. But it's not about having these adult, grown up discussions about the gradual replacement of the natural, beautiful world we have around us, the last remnants of it. that we can, and it's like there needs to be that shift in consciousness, and it always comes down to that. There's a word in nature called phase transition, right? When something happens very, very suddenly, right? And I'm not losing, I'm not going to give up on us, on the world, on humanity yet, because I think that this phase transition has a lot of chances. And the reason I believe that has to do with my understanding of plasma. Another topic we got into heavily in the last webinar, because plasma turns out to be kind of a key element of the future. Plasma is like, we're entering into what I think is the plasma age. And we can't have they're all talking about like a multi-planetary existence and blah blah blah, but what they aren't talking about is plasma and what that means. What is plasma, right? Most people think it's that part of the universe out there that you see, the dust and all that stuff, that's like that 1% out there, that's plasma. Well, actually it turns out no, everything is plasma.
Mm-hmm.
99.9% of it is plasma. You just don't see the majority of it. It's in another state. It's actually a looming, lingering consciousness. And it's amazing how the Gnostics, way thousands of years ago, knew about that. In the center of our galaxy, there's these plasma streams, which are now called Birkeland. We now know them as Birkeland currents, right? And we now know that there is this, spontaneously plasma forms conscious into a conscious entity. They've done artificial, consciousness entity in laboratories to prove the case, but there is plasma on a much larger scale out there. So I think that, us being plasma beings as well, and learning to understand this stuff about plasma and our connection to this invisible plasma world, means that we're not just connected through frequency, but we're also connected on this plasma level. And that means that a phase transition is not that far-fetched of an idea any longer. When we are connected, we're only seeing that little bit of us that we actually see, that microscopic amount of dust that manifests itself as a body, as a planet, as a galaxy, compared to the greater whole of everything. And so therefore, we are, just because we don't see that other part of it, doesn't mean that we're not intimately connected to it.
Well,
There's this
do you
Bedelia
see the
tablet.
feeling of love? Do you see it? Like, I don't see the feeling of love. I feel it. I'm certain of its existence. I experience it every day. I don't, but I can't make it out, and say this is the feeling of love. And like what you're saying is, I'm sorry, you froze for me, Frank. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there. I'm just sitting still, like.
What what you're saying is we have to get beyond our idea of this. We're all just disconnected little pieces floating around, that
Yes.
we are connected by a primal uh substance,
Right.
that connects everything, and that connects you and I right now. And while we're floating in different spheres of this world, our wavelength is so similar. We can not talk for a month or two and be exactly at the same points of observation and consciousness, and that is because we're connected on that level. We're literally connected on that level.
Isn't that amazing?
And beautiful.
Yeah, and like when that woman came up to us last night at that dinner, it was like, you talk about love, there was this amazing feeling of like kindredness, where like we recognized each other even though we had never met before that moment, and we're from different countries even, right? It was just it's just proof that we are, this idea of an anthropos, that we actually are a force of nature. We're not just these egos inside these little bodies, but we're actually this force of nature. That, when we, that our breath and our tears and everything are forces of nature, just like the wind is. And you can't, how do you identify a wind? Right? You don't see it. Well, you do see it by the way it blows the leaves. You see it, you feel it by the way it hits your face. So it's real. It's out there, even though you can't put your hands on it, right? It's just there. It's the same kind of quality, right? So this is what the other side is up against, right? So this is why I believe this is what's behind what they're trying to do in terms of body area networks, and in terms of trying to place smart dust to block out this real universe that's out there, the remnants of that which was given to us to go and explore. It's like, it's a go forth in the material world, you divine beings, and see what you can come up with, right? Well, this jealous, envious force has been pushing back on that. And for them, they would do nothing, they'd be nothing more than happy if they somehow proved in their world, well, see, they didn't believe in themselves, and we actually were better at, pushing our false ideology on them than they were about believing who they really are, or what they really are, for that matter, right?
You know, I've been having these thoughts lately that what we're really observing, it's not, there's some, let's just say, manifested archons here that you can see. When you hear them, this being is like, it's just an archontic being. And I don't know that there's much in terms of direct influence positive that you can have over that. It's such an inverted consciousness. But then there are mostly are the tools, which is a potential divine spark, which has been just so far confused. And it is so confused that it believes the archontic story.
Yes,
And it
absolutely. That's
and it
key.
it acts in that interest because it is so confused about its own beingness and who it really is. And for whatever reason, I have regained some hope that we can reach some of those confused ones that are so strongly pushing for something with our positive influence, and actually say, hey, there is another way, and you might enjoy that way way more than the one that you're currently working on, but you just didn't know about it. You forgot it. You forgot who you were, and you got enticed and coerced and confused. And okay, we all did to some degree, but here we are. And I'm at this point where I know that what we're presenting to the people, and with the intensity that we're doing it, might get very uh heavy sometimes. But please know that what we're trying to do together is identify the problem correctly, because unless we do that, we cannot move into the correct solution. And it is error of thinking that has led us here. We have to reharmonize our thinking. So we have to understand the problem correctly so we can work on a solution correctly. And unless we get to the bottom of it, we don't do that. And that's why the intensity is here. But we all feel that maybe 5, 10 years from now, we could be in a completely different area of work that will not require that anymore because we've moved past it. But what Frank said so beautifully in the beginning of the show is that the greatest deception is happening now for people who think this is it. We have won. This is the greatest deception of all deceptions, because we're literally stronger than ever on the same path, but it looks more beautiful. They put up the decorations again. They're waving the flags again. They're playing the hymns again. They're doing all that which was taken from the people, and now they're enjoying it. And so we are not there yet, but we can get there. That's what we're saying. We can and we shall, if we raise our consciousness and our thinking to the correct levels. Is that what you see too?
Totally. And I think that it's important for us to go and take the risks and talk about the things that people may be a little bit uncomfortable with. And but not in the sense of trying to keep people in a low vibration, because you're saying, see, I told you. No, it's not about that. It's about, I'm talking about the script that's out there, and how right now the script is being, for us, what they're doing to prevent us seeing past that script and seeing the illusion of it is to create distractions, even really good ones. And they're getting to the point where it's the potency of the script and the distractions are very, very high. Let me give you an example, like USAID or US aid, for example, right? Everyone's like, wow, this is, unbelievable. This organization was out there all this time, right? And they were like, promoting this left crazy agenda and all this crazy stuff, this, extreme liberal ideologies that we've seen manifest out there, which now Trump is finally pushing out of the way, right? Well, it's funny, and I didn't really pay much attention to it because I obviously don't hold much, like I've already said, to this hopium of what they're dishing out. But I couldn't help notice that even some of the more brilliant alternative media writers, like I subscribe to one of them. I won't mention the name, just out of fairness, but it's a rather brilliant, normally otherwise very brilliant thinker and writer, and it was actually making an example of how USAID is unveiling the underbelly of the world that people have been denying for so long, and quoting, like the same old, still quoting people like so-called intellectuals like Anthony Sutton, right, who peddles the false narrative of that crazy failed artist madman with one testicle who, as a total anomaly, rose to power in Germany and somehow drummed up the money and the funding from Wall Street to, because he wanted to take over the whole planet. Of course, that was the dream all along. And Bush family and all the bankers were a part of it. That psychosis, that idea of then taking this, money that he got and then turning on his people, probably the smartest and educated and arguably the most disciplined people on the planet, and subjecting them to mass entrainment psychosis, a very, very popular word that came about in recent times. And he somehow, succeeded. And then after the war, after he trashed, that they trashed the entire country, they just moved over and continued on with the Fourth Reich in America. That's an idea that's very, very popular, and people still believe that. But I think you watched the third part of the Time Capsule webinar.
Yeah.
I think I lay a pretty good case to, pretty much put an end to those myths about what, really went behind, what was really the causes of the start of that war, who was really behind it, and what was the true motivation. I back it up with imperial evidence.
You know what's interesting? That actually Peter Thiel, right, whom I mentioned earlier, draws comparisons between the 1920s in the Weimar Republic and our time here. Like literally, he draws those comparisons in a statement.
Of course he does.
Well, yeah, when he talks about the end of liberalism and the end of democracy, he literally draws that comparison. I'm like, that's interesting. It says a lot about what these people might know that they can't say, but how they point to certain things, right?
Right.
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I think I put to bed that concept of this whole madman, the lone madman, like the lone gunman. I mean, it's always the same, script, right? Just on other dimensions. And if you look at that, I welcome people to check it out and prove me wrong, man. Watch it and tell me what I'd laid down in empirical evidence is incorrect. And I really would love to have that conversation, because I think once we start having these levels of conversation, then we really push things like USAID out of the way, and we start talking about the meat of the matter. The bigger picture, that this has been going on for thousands of years, not just the last few hundred years. And, what we're seeing when Peter Thiel talks about this is, they're talking about it moving into sort of a technocratic fascist state, like implying that, essentially that's what was going on 100 years ago. But they're not drawing on the full picture of information. They're not giving you the whole palette of data that has to do with what led to that in the first place. And that's where I think it's important for us to have these discussions. And even if they're uncomfortable, I'll put myself out there, I'll take the bullets, but I do want to have these conversations, not because I'm trying to attack any one particular group of people or because I really love rubbing people the wrong way. No, I really want the truth. I really want to get to the bottom of this stuff. And I'm willing to scrape my elbows if necessary and my knees on the path to doing it together with you, bro, if you're down for that,
Well, that's why we do the Naked Truth Show. Also, we've been in it for long enough to realize that all peoples, all ethnicities, all religions have been both created and used by a certain form of consciousness. This is not about elevating one group or saying it. This is acknowledging that each group, we've been divided, separated, put in different boxes, and now these boxes are used as needed to further an agenda through centuries and millennia. It's not about one bad group and all the others are good, or one good group and all the others. It's not about it. We're all being used and abused, all of us, all people of the world.
Right.
And the consciousness that is driving that abuse has no allegiance to any of us, no group, no ethnicity, no religion. They roll by the beat of their own drum. That's nothing to do with what we're doing here.
Right. They don't care. And the thing is, the war is against us, like us realizing our fullest potential. And as long as we accept and adopt an ideology and a belief system, which may be a paradigm we can grab for a while to develop some things, but if we stay clutched and clinging to it, then are we not blocking our fullest potential to be what we could be? And instead, every time if it's a whatever the system is, if it's a religion, if it's technocracy, if it's AI, the worship of something outside of ourselves, it always leads to the same thing. We never get to who and what we really are. And that's what I think this is all about. That's what, the Gnostics were trying to tell us. Hey, the aeons who created us, they didn't put a cap on what we could be. They didn't say this is the experiment and it's got to stay in the aquarium. No, they said, let's just see. It should actually go beyond what we are, because that's what makes it anomalous. That's what makes free will. And that's what actually, divine free will really is. It's the ability to grow beyond what even our creator or creators or Sophia, or whatever you want to call it, actually could even imagine. This is the special something that nobody can predict. You cannot predict it. You cannot quantify it. But if you aren't willing to take the risks and throw down, the things that you believe and dissect them in an adult and in a healthy and maybe even a humorous way, if you can, and use that as an experimental workbook to get beyond those belief systems, then that's the problem, to me anyway.
And the irony here is, Frank, that a lot of those folks who are working so feverishly on the transhumanist agenda and enhancing these and changing this biology are actually, um, on some level, believing that they're fulfilling this through this technology
Yeah.
versus fulfilling it through our own innate abilities, right? And remembering those and remembering our co-creative abilities and bringing them about. I believe we came here literally, Frank, this small group of beings that we are, relatively speaking, we came here to remind ourselves and everyone around us that this is what we're capable of. Not We don't need that technology to do it for us, which will destroy us if we let it. um, we have those abilities. That's been our conversation for years now, and we're going to have it for as long as it's necessary until the penny drops. We have the 100th monkey effect, and this thing takes on a life of its own, where we don't need to feed it constantly, but it's moving. It's moving, and people are moving in that direction. That's been our intention together. I know that's also been the intention, why you go out and every once in a while you disappear for months on end and you work on some of these amazing bodies of work, the webinars. But I would actually say if people went back and watched your webinars that you've created over the last years, they would perfectly understand what moment we're in, because you've been also funneling this and making sure that people really get the right information at the right time. Where can people find that, my friend? And where should they start on this journey?
Well, it's interesting to look at it. I mean, you could to find me, of course, is to just look up my name, Frank Jacob, and add .com to it. That's probably the easiest way. Or you could go to cyberhive.tv, which is where I have all these webinars, and you have a link down below as well to some of them. I believe you should put a link to the latest one. I think if you're going to start somewhere, you could go to the first one, like Tale of Two Timelines, or The Inner Looking Glass, which came after that. But sometimes it's also interesting to go backwards, start the newest, and then see what led me to, along to that last one I was at, because they all kind of build on each other. And in some ways, the information, it should actually supersede some of the earlier information. It's building on something. And and any, I think, researcher worth their salt has to make the evolution and has to take the steps forward, so they can kind of put their information into the proper context moving forward. Okay, this is what we had before, and here's where we find it again. But now we have this new added building block that we found, and let's take that into the picture as well. And let's look at both of those and see how they still work together, if they even work together, and what we can learn from both of those. And so everything kind of builds. Everything that I've been working on has been building on something, which I'm kind of proud to say that I the investment was grueling. And yeah, they're not for free, but I mean, think of it this way: you're saving yourself the cost of a lot of books and reading and whatever, and just you can just dive right in, and there's a way to start a discussion. And I just found out that on my platform they've added this new feature where you can have discussion buttons. You can create a new discussion. So I'm going to start doing some more of that than now that that feature is available, so we can have this conversation in a very safe place and within reach of the data that we've been taking in. So that's something that's really cool that I'd like to offer people that are either already have done the webinar, or people that will now, of course, storm to my website and do all the webinars, because I think they should. But anyway, I think what we're talking about here now is something that we offer people for free, which adds a lot of interesting starting points, starting ground for people to go down rabbit holes. And you do a lot of them. You do these rabbit hole things on your own private channel and your own things. And I do them, of course, with the use of my webinar and stuff. But I think what we're going toward here is we're going toward a place where it's safe for people to be able to explore some of these, let's just say, more controversial areas without immediately feeling threatened or in a dangerous place by uttering or putting out ideas and questions which aren't safe, because we know what happened during the COVID era where as soon as you put any kind of controversial idea onto the blogosphere, you were canceled. That's not going to happen anymore, and I think we've had a chance to build those platforms up in our own way.
Frank, I got to say something that I said off camera before we started here. I really appreciate your voice and what you bring to the conversation in a sea of very streamlined journalism, very streamlined reporting. We had a diverse alternative media that was probably more scattered and less organized 10, 15 years ago. What we have now is a streamlined, organized, new mainstream alternative media. And so there's only so many subjects and topics that it is allowed to discuss, and it is constantly cross-promoting each other, and it is making it seem as that is all that there is to know and research. And so, I would love to see your voice even more than it is now being elevated in terms of you becoming a presence here, and to an extent where people go and listen to how Frank Jacob sees this entire thing right now. I know we're doing it here. I know you're being guest on many shows, but it's up to the audience also to decide whether they want that. I know I vote yes. I would love to hear more from you, see more from you, and you become one of those voices that always leads people back to themselves and go, here's the information, but here's what I'm actually saying is believe in you, take responsibility. You're a co-creator. Let's get the show on the road. We don't have many of those voices out there right now. So I would love for you to be more visible even than you are right now, and
I appreciate that.
heard by more people, because your voice is constructive, it's uplifting, it's positive, but mostly it's truthful, right? Which is, there's very little of that.
Well, thank you very much, brother. I appreciate hearing that. And I mean, I'm working on it. All I can say is that I'm glad we have this forum that we have. I'm also happy to have been involved and invited into Quartet, which is another place. And you're right. I'm trying to create a channel that is, kind of like wholly me in that way. And I want to build it organically. The thing is, what I don't like is what I've seen a lot happen in the blogosphere in the last 10 years is that there's this astroturfing of alternative media. Do you know what that term means, astroturfing?
I know,
like
but explain it in this context, please.
It's like when you basically create the illusion of green grass, and you put up the artificial impression that there's this huge wave of people interested in these personalities. Why? Well, you've got the money to do it. And astroturfing means you can put up you've got the budget that you can basically, bombard people with an endless, amount of propaganda to get them onto your channel. And that's not organic, because what happens is then people end up there and they're like, okay, well, there's that formula, the 60-40 formula, right? 60% truth, 40% lies, right? So they end up in those forums. And what I'm trying to do is I want to get it built organically. So I'm very proud. I've actually got like 6,000 subscribers on YouTube, and maybe I can build on that to the point where it's an honest, organic crowd of people that want to explore these topics in my particular style, which is always going to be a little bit rock and roll if I can make it that way, you know.
And that's exactly what, for example, if I'm going to go and watch someone, which is very, very seldom, I like raw information. I rarely watch people because it's always, it's another human seeing something from their perspective. And if I want to give my perspective, it's hard to bring, but there are a few people who I do watch or who I do go and tune into. And you're one of those people, you also have this level-headed and balanced way about you, which I enjoy very much. It's not leaning into it so hard that, you just get, whoa. I love that. It also has a sort of a diplomatic tone to it by saying, hey, yes, this is the truth, but we're not gonna hit you over the head with it. We're presenting it, and now you sort of decide what you do with that. So I think that's needed, and I think we need more harmony. We need a reharmonization. We need to level the important but dark information with the very good and positive one always. And I think you're one of the masters in it. So thank you for that. Thank you for co-hosting this with me, the Naked Truth Show. I believe still we should do it more often if time allows, uh, because these conversations also feed my spirit. By the way, not just hopefully the spirit of the audience.
I always come away from our shows like with this like deep satisfaction somehow. It's like it's a very satisfying conversation because you have all these perspectives. You're way more out there than I am, and I'm probably more like the mole underground, coming up for air every now and then. But still, as you say, we still somehow are on the same frequencies and wavelengths. I'm just, and because we do that, I think it's very natural. So I think let's try to do more of them. Absolutely. I have every intention to do it, and I would like that, very much. So I don't know when our next one is. We never know. Like, let's try to do it within the next 4 weeks, of course. And see where it goes. Sometimes I'm also a little bit like shy, where I figure, do I have anything of meaning to say? Like, have I accumulated enough something interesting to even listen to? So that's kind of like one of my own personal blocks, I could say.
I think people come for you to these conversations. They come for who you are while you're saying and sharing what you share, right? And the information, I mean, most of it is findable. Don't get me wrong. It's accumulated over decades, but it is findable. But I think people enjoy that someone has done it and is not trying to sell them a particular affiliation, or this is the party that will fix it, this is the guy that will fix it. No, it's just the information, right? Here it is, this is what I've accumulated, look at it. That approach is very seldom, very rare these days, as even the
Well,
biggest.
one other element that I would say that I would add into that is that I have a particular pleasure in revealing the emperor having no clothes.
Sure.
I enjoy it. I enjoy that because not because I'm vindictive, but there's a little sort of, part of me inside that kind of really enjoys when an injustice is revealed. And
Mhm.
it's just so blatant and so obvious that you don't have to even, rub it in.
No.
You just reveal it, and it's clear. And anybody who's awake can see it, and it's not about beating someone over the head. See, there it is. Can you see it? Can you see it? No, it's like, it's almost the subtler thing is the more powerful thing than, some of the stuff out there in the media is so like over the top. It's especially in videos and in shows, right? I've produced a lot of shows. I've produced shows for Red Bull. I've produced shows even for Gaia. And, most of the stuff that you see out there is like, it's just so blatantly like, let's run that loop again so people can see it again. Let's add the dramatic music to it and the stingers. And it's like, you're too dumb to see it. So we're going to show it to you 50 times so that you stay with the show, right? Because you think something else is coming, although nothing else ever does come, right? You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, absolutely. That's why we call this the naked truth, you know That's what this show is. So Frank, thank you for being a wonderful co-host in this. I so enjoy this. We're putting all the links in the description, but frankjacob.com, cyberhive.tv, those are and of course Frank Jacob's YouTube channel. Those are sort of the main hubs. We'll put them in the description. If you haven't yet, go check out the webinars. If you have, go recheck them. From the perspective of today, your mind will be blown in some of those things because they've come to fruition. So it's always interesting. Frank,
We didn't even have a chance to go into some of the stuff that we actually planned, but I think we covered it in a lot of ways. So we don't need to show the pictures of the blood cells with the weird things inside of them. I think we've covered that.
but there's always a next time, and we can bring him
Yes.
up. As much as we have an overview of where we're going in a show, we're really this free flow. Let's see where the conversation takes us. So that's usually how it goes, right, brother?
Right. Exactly, brother.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much for being here with me again. Really an honor and a pleasure. And Inspired Tribe, thank you so much for tuning in. We love you. We appreciate you. We'll be back with you again very, very soon.